I will never look at prisons the same way after learning this. Narrated by Morgan Freeman for National Geographic. Prisons, by their very nature, are places of confinement and punishment. But some institutions go beyond mere deprivation, with brutal conditions, infamous inmates, and the constant threat of violence. These are the world's most dangerous prisons, where survival becomes a daily struggle, and hope dwindles with each passing moment. Join me on a journey inside the walls of these infamous institutions, to explore the lives of those who live there, and the systems that perpetuate their existence. Inside the walls of Bang Kwang, Thailand's Big Tiger, lies a world shrouded in mystery and fear. Our first stop takes us to Southeast Asia, just outside of Bangkok, Thailand. This bustling metropolis is known for its vibrant culture and rich history, but hidden away from the tourist attractions is a place few dare to think about. Here, we find Bang Kwang Central Prison, commonly known as the Big Tiger. This notorious facility has earned its fearsome nickname for a reason. This high-security institution houses a population of hardened criminals, many on death row, living under a cloud of fear and uncertainty. The atmosphere is tense, and the air is thick with the weight of despair. Conditions at Bang Kwang are harsh. Overcrowding is rampant, with cells designed for a few inmates packed with dozens. The lack of space forces prisoners to sleep in shifts, and personal space is a luxury few can afford. Sanitation is minimal, and disease spreads rapidly. The threat of violence is ever present. Inmates must navigate a world where survival often depends on their ability to adapt to the harsh conditions. Gangs wield significant power within the prison walls, and disputes often erupt into deadly clashes. The constant threat of violence adds another layer of tension to an already volatile environment. Inmates endure extreme temperatures, inadequate medical care, and limited access to basic necessities. The sweltering heat can be unbearable, and the lack of proper medical facilities means that even minor ailments can become life-threatening. Despite the brutal conditions, inmates find ways to endure. They engage in various activities to pass the time and maintain a semblance of normalcy. Crafting, playing sports, and other small distractions provide a brief respite from the harsh reality. Informal economies thrive, with prisoners trading goods and services to improve their meager existence. These underground markets are a lifeline for many, offering a way to obtain items that are otherwise inaccessible. Some cling to hope through religious practice, while others seek solace in the bonds formed with fellow inmates. In a place where despair is the norm, these small acts of faith and camaraderie offer a glimmer of hope. Navigating chaos, life inside Carandiru Penitentiary. Our journey next takes us to South America, to the now decommissioned Carandiru Penitentiary in Sao Paulo, Brazil. This notorious prison, once a symbol of the harsh realities of the Brazilian penal system, has a history that continues to haunt the nation. Once one of the largest prisons in Latin America, Carandiru became infamous for its inhumane conditions and the 1992 massacre that claimed the lives of 111 inmates. The prison's name is now synonymous with brutality and neglect. The prison's vast complex housed thousands of inmates, far exceeding its intended capacity. The overcrowding was so severe that it created a breeding ground for violence and disease. At Carandiru, overcrowding reached unimaginable levels, with thousands of inmates crammed into a space designed for a fraction of that number. This extreme congestion led to a breakdown of order and basic human decency. The living conditions were deplorable, with prisoners packed tightly into cells, often with barely enough room to move. The lack of space and resources created a desperate and volatile environment. With thousands of inmates crammed into a space designed for a fraction of that number, the prison was a ticking time bomb, waiting for a spark to ignite chaos. Basic sanitation was non-existent, and disease was rampant. Inmates suffered from a lack of clean water, proper medical care, and adequate nutrition, leading to widespread illness and suffering. The prison was plagued by gang violence, and guards had little control over the population. The power dynamics within the prison walls were often dictated by the strongest and most ruthless inmates. The 1992 massacre, triggered by a riot that spiraled out of control, was a tragic culmination of the prison's systemic issues. The event shocked the world and highlighted the urgent need for prison reform. The massacre exposed the brutal reality of life inside Carandiru and the systemic failures that allowed such an atrocity to occur. It was a stark reminder of the consequences of neglecting the human rights of incarcerated individuals. Although Carandiru was demolished in 2002, the memories of its dark past linger on. The site where the prison once stood is now a symbol of the need for justice and human dignity. Its legacy serves as a chilling reminder of the consequences of neglecting the human rights of incarcerated individuals. The story of Carandiru is a powerful testament to the importance of humane treatment and the ongoing struggle for prison reform worldwide. The Alcatraz of the South, Louisiana State Penitentiary. Our exploration of the world's most dangerous prisons now takes us to the American South, to Louisiana State Penitentiary, often referred to as Angola due to the former plantation on which it sits. Often called the Alcatraz of the South, Angola has a long and troubled past, rooted in the legacy of slavery and racial injustice in the United States. Known as the Alcatraz of the South, Angola has a long and troubled history, rooted in the legacy of slavery and racial injustice in the United States. For much of its existence, Angola operated as a brutal work farm, where predominantly African-American inmates were subjected to forced labor and inhumane treatment. Violence was commonplace, and escape was nearly impossible due to the prison's remote location and heavily armed guards. Our journey through the American prison system continues in California, at Pelican Bay State Prison. Opened in 1989, this supermax facility was designed to house the state's most dangerous criminals in near-total isolation. Pelican Bay is notorious for its use of solitary confinement, with many inmates spending 23 hours a day locked in small, windowless cells for years, even decades. The psychological toll of such extreme isolation is immense, leading to depression, anxiety, hallucinations, and self-harm. Critics argue that Pelican Bay's reliance on solitary confinement amounts to torture and violates the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. While some reforms have been implemented in recent years, Pelican Bay remains a stark example of the ongoing debate surrounding the use of solitary confinement in the United States. Imprisoned with the worst, ADX Florence Supermax Prison. Our exploration of Supermax prisons next takes us to Colorado, to the United States Penitentiary, Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX in Florence. Considered the most secure prison in the United States, ADX Florence houses some of the country's most notorious criminals, including terrorists, mob bosses, and serial killers. Inmates at ADX Florence spend the vast majority of their days in solitary confinement, their movements tightly controlled, and their contact with the outside world severely limited. The prison's design, with its numerous checkpoints, motion sensors, and armed guards, makes escape virtually impossible. While ADX Florence represents the pinnacle of prison security, it also raises questions about the psychological and ethical implications of subjecting individuals to such extreme isolation. A shadow of history, HM Prison Wormwood Scrubs. Our journey takes us across the Atlantic to England, to HM Prison Wormwood Scrubs in London. With its imposing facade and long corridors, this Victorian-era prison has borne witness to centuries of punishment and despair. Throughout its history, Wormwood Scrubs has housed a diverse range of inmates, from petty criminals to notorious murderers. Conditions within the prison have fluctuated over the years, but overcrowding, violence, and inadequate healthcare have been recurring problems. The prison's aging infrastructure and limited resources pose ongoing challenges for both inmates and staff. Wormwood Scrubs stands as a reminder of the enduring legacy of punishment and the ongoing need for reform within the criminal justice system. Survival and the human spirit. Despite brutal conditions, the ever-present threat of violence, and the psychological impact of confinement, human beings are remarkably resilient. In the world's most dangerous prisons, where hope can feel like a distant memory, inmates find ways to survive, to find meaning, and to connect with their humanity. They forge bonds with fellow inmates, creating makeshift families within the prison walls. They find solace in religious practice, in art, in music, and in literature, reminding themselves that they are more than just their crimes. They hold on to hope, to the possibility of redemption, and to the belief that one day they may return to the outside world. The Price of Punishment, a look at prison reform. Our journey into the world's most dangerous prisons has exposed us to some of humanity's darkest corners, to the consequences of poverty, inequality, and systemic injustice. These institutions, built with the intention to punish and rehabilitate, often serve to perpetuate cycles of violence, trauma, and despair. The stark reality is that many prisons are overcrowded, underfunded, and plagued by corruption. The lack of adequate mental health services and educational programs only exacerbates the suffering of inmates, leaving them ill-equipped to reintegrate into society upon release. Built with the intention to punish and rehabilitate, these institutions often serve to perpetuate cycles of violence, trauma, and despair. The overcrowded conditions and lack of resources create an environment where violence becomes a means of survival. Inmates often leave prison more damaged than when they entered, perpetuating a cycle of crime and punishment that benefits no one. The stories we've encountered force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our societies and the systems we've created. These are not just isolated incidents, but symptoms of a larger, systemic problem. The dehumanization of prisoners reflects a broader societal failure to address the root causes of crime, such as poverty, lack of education, and mental health issues. They compel us to ask difficult questions about the purpose of punishment, the meaning of justice, and the inherent dignity of every human being. The path forward requires a fundamental shift in our approach to criminal justice, one that prioritizes rehabilitation over retribution, compassion over condemnation, and hope over despair. This shift involves investing in mental health services, educational programs, and vocational training that can provide inmates with the tools they need to succeed outside prison walls. A shift that prioritizes rehabilitation over retribution, compassion over condemnation, and hope over despair. For it is only by breaking these cycles of violence and despair that we can truly create a more just and humane world. This means not only changing policies but also changing hearts and minds, recognizing the humanity in every individual, and offering second chances. By investing in the potential of every person, we can transform our prisons from places of punishment to places of possibility, where individuals can heal, grow, and ultimately contribute positively to society. This is the vision of prison reform that we must strive to achieve.